Hello and welcome to part 16 of my rocks creation series. In this video I want to start off by mentioning that I actually decided to go back with the very simple lerp between the close-up object scale version of the texture and the distant texture. So it's very simple right now, and that allows me to have some nice control over how it looks from a distance. And when I get closer, it might lose some of that detail, but I still see it a little bit more clear when I'm close up. So in this video, I also want to take a look at how we can get rid of some of the texture seams we have. So we have a texture seam here, which is kind of actually pretty well hidden with this. You can still see it here. So we're gonna evaluate it a little bit on this and see how we can minimize this a little bit. But in order to better see the changes we do here, what I want to start off by doing is to take that original texture sample I have here and then replace that with the distance blending and object scale version of the texture here. So right now it looks like this, and as we can see here, it's very clear with the texture seam here. So what I'm going to do instead of that is to see how we can minimize that texture seam here. And as far as I can tell, the best way of doing this, I've been researching this for a bit and I can't really decide what is the best way to do it, but it seems to be that people nowadays, they paint out the texture seam in various programs, like you can do it in ZBrush using, I think it's called ZAppLink, which allows you to do it using Photoshop, and you can use canvas paint in 3ds Max, and you can also use MudBox for this. So I'm going to be using MudBox in this case. So I'm going to start off by importing our low poly model, which is going to import this guy here. And whoops, if I just have projection on here, so if I just click here, it's gonna say, do you want to create a new paint layer? So I'm gonna say okay to that. And what I'm gonna do, you can do various things. I can actually just open up a layer here, but what I'm gonna do is to use the projection and then say once down here where we have this off for the stencil, I'm gonna import a texture. And to begin with, I just want to use that exact same texture I've been using all the time, so it's just going to be easier for me to work. I'm just going to put this overlay of the texture here on top of this. So I want to make sure that this tiles a little bit, so I can check this one, use tiles, and you can uncheck this show tiles if you want, but it's still going to tile anyway. It's just a way of showing this. So you can press Q to hide it temporarily if you want to see what's going on. If I press S and the right button, I can scale this down. So I want to have, since this texture is pretty it is seamless, as you can see. There are no squares around here, so I just wanted to scale it up a little bit. So once I start painting with the projection tool, you can see I'm painting on top of this this model here, and I just want to do this so that I painted mostly only on the areas that are facing the camera. So I want to keep rotating it around and not paint too much outside the camera area. And this is actually also a good place to use if you have a Wacom tablet. I'm just going to switch to that. I think it's a little bit easier to work with. Depends on what you prefer to do. You can actually see here, if you paint a little bit too much on the edges, you get these stretching textures. So you got to be careful with that and make sure to paint over that. So it takes a little while to get used to. I ended up having quite a lot of these the first time I tried this technique out. But eventually I guess you will get used to it. I'm still in the process of learning and practicing just by doing it. Okay, so this was a really fast paint job. I probably missed some spots maybe, and oops, might not be the best. Whoops. What you can also do in here, I keep doing that apparently, is that you can actually also, for example, load up. You can work with different layers, so you can right click up here and say new layer, and then you can, for example, load up a different texture map. So when I was at work, I had a break and was walking, taking a little bit of break, yeah, and I actually stumbled across some rocks, so I took some pictures of them just with my iPhone, and I think I saved them under sorted. So here, so you can see I took a bunch of pictures of various rock textures. So let's pick a different one. So right here, also, for example, paint some gray texture, rock texture here, just to experiment a little bit with this. Check it just to get a little bit of variation into this. So depending on what you want to do. Right now I'm just playing around with this. I would definitely, in a different scenario, I would pick a texture that wasn't that much different from the background texture, so to speak, because this is kind of two different, completely different textures. So what I think I'm gonna do with this this particular case here is to see if I can paint the bottom a little bit different, so it looks like it's hitting the wrong button. Whoops. And actually hit a spot up here. That's gonna be alright, I guess. So with that, I'm gonna turn off this down or just hide it away. But we can also change the opacity for this one, so we can tone it down a little bit. So it looks a bit like this, maybe. That's a bit too much, perhaps. So something like that. I might actually want a little bit something in here as well, just to add a little bit of variation to this. So many, let's say, techniques you can apply when making this kind of stuff. It's kind of hard to figure out what the best method is. So I'm just trying to show you just a few things I did try and what I got out of it, and hopefully if you're into doing some of this stuff as well, you might pick up a few things as well. So anyway, let's just keep this for now, and what I'm going to do is to merge visible. So I just get one layer and then I'm going to export this. So I call this MudBox Painted. And then I'm going to take that map I just created and I'm just gonna import it like this, as you can see here. And I'm gonna open up my material, it's here, and I'm gonna drag that in like this. So what we want to pay attention to is this area here, obviously, with all the seam very visible. So I'm gonna hit save, and then what we see here is the new texture, and the seam is pretty well hidden now. We still get a little bit of texture bleeding in around the edge, and I haven't really found a perfect way of getting rid of it. One way we could try and do this is to add, as you can see here from a different example I have, add some padding around it. So what I'm going to do is to open up my texture I just painted, and with that you can, if you have Xnormal installed, you can go down on the Xnormal and select dilation or whatever it's called. And I think 16 should be fine for this, so you might want to add more, so let's just try with 32, but I think 16 is okay, because I think that's what I used for the normals. And then you can see it adds this area around here, which should hopefully take care of a little bit of that texture bleeding. So I really haven't always had the best results with this, but I heard that this should be helping out a little bit. So what we can do is to zoom in a little bit on this area here. I don't think we can get much closer. And then just pay very close attention to this to see if anything changes at all. It might not. Well, we can still see the seam, but and I'm not really sure it changed that much at all. But yeah, it's a different texture now. As you can see, we have this around all the way around. But anyway, so now we are actually back to where we started, just with a different texture, because now we have that same problem that where the small one is very high resolution and the big one is low resolution. So we need to figure out a way to combine this. And what I just tend to do with this is to actually just add a lerp in between. We have this original one, and just add a lerp with a 0.5, depending on how you want this to blend. So you might want to change this a little bit, tweak it. As you can see, you lose some of the detail that you just created. But the seam here is still well hidden. If you pay really close attention, you can see it, but it's not that visible. And if you think it's too visible, you can always use more of the mesh texture, I would call it, by turning it down a little bit. And that way, it's gonna be more hidden, hopefully. So you can still see it if you look very closely, but with this big model, I think this is, to my standards, it's perfectly okay, I would say. And you can see we have still retained some of that texture painting that we did. It's not as clear as I did it, but it's still visible. And once we get close to this, we can see it's a blend in between the high resolution and the kind of blended the low resolution behind. So even though it's not perfect, it's still something in between. So you gotta weigh these things together up against each other, depending on how much you want. Because if you heighten this one and then hit save, you're gonna see a little bit more of the scale painting, and that might be a little bit better, I would say, in this particular case. Then you just gotta live with a little bit more clear seam, as you might or might not be able to see here. So it's around here. So it's a kind of hard to say exactly what is best for this. So we could comment this one and say this is the mesh texture. And what we haven't dealt with yet is a way of maybe adding some normal map scaling like we do with the albedo map. And just the way we do it with the lerp here, we can do something similar with a generic texture map, because this is also there's actually also the part of the mesh texture, you can call it. So if we group these two, these are particular for that mesh, and all this stuff out here is just the general tiling maps that we add. And actually also this one, but I don't believe I use it for anything. I'm just gonna unhook it for a moment, and then I'm gonna pay close attention to all of them and see what happens when I click save, which I do now. Okay, so very subtle change. I don't really see any need for this at this point, so for now I'm just gonna leave it. I don't use it in this particular case. I will take a look at how we can maybe use this in another context. But for now I'm actually just gonna disconnect it, I think. So I guess this is the way I would set up my texture for now. It seems like a good compromise between having some detail and still having, you can see that, let's say save. You can see this is the original one, and while it does have some more detail at a distance, it becomes very blurred out when we get close. And this one does look quite a bit different, but we also changed the texture, but it kind of retains some of that detail when up close, and it might be a little bit blurred. So to be honest, I haven't really found the perfect way, balance between getting a clear, crisp result and getting rid of the stuff, the texture seams. One last thing I could try, and that's going to be the last one for this video, is to just we could try and go with just instead of looping this with the distance, we can distance map. We could just take it from the close-up scale. So just to see how that looks. Just notice that we don't have the distance scale, the distance blend now. We only have the object scale. So that's gonna look like this. So wow. I don't know. Actually, let me ask you guys watching this what you think. What would be the best approach? Because honestly, I'm not sure. My logical sense tells me it should be something like this, but when I look at it and I see if things get blurred out, like when I'm up close here, I kind of get a little bit disappointed with all the work I just did and getting this blurred up result. So I think it looks pretty cool at a distance, but then again, once I get close up, I'm not really satisfied with it. So actually what we could do, that's going to be the final thing, is actually to, instead of using that alpha and using that a fixed alpha, I'm going to use that alpha from down here, from the distance blend. Let's see what that changes, if that changes anything noticeable. What did I do there? I wanted to save that one. It didn't seem to do squat, so screw that. Yeah, well, it does something. It loses all the detail from the mesh texture at a distance, of course. So that's a no-go, definitely a no-go. Okay, so it's got to find some kind of balance between this, I guess. Yeah. Anyway, let me know what you guys think, and hopefully you have a better way of doing this than I have. So thank you for watching, and bye bye.